Hi, hello, uglies. Welcome in. We are in Dragula 666, and I am so excited. I knew the Boulets were gonna feed us some great content, and that is exactly what they did, and we are gonna talk about episode 1 today. So this season we're going to talk a lot about the floor shows, we're going to talk about production stuff, and we're going to talk about edits that I'm noticing now because Dragula is really stapling itself as a reality TV monster. But it's doing it in its own very unique way. It's not taking the route that other drag reality shows do where they are focused on the drama. The Boulets really try, I think, in their whole process of producing and editing this show to make everything horror focused, to make it monster focused, to make it performer front lining so that you get to see the art and the performance first. And that's what I really love about the show. They don't do a lot of gimmicks to make you be distracted by petty dramas and relationships. Sometimes the ghouls create that drama themselves and it's interesting to watch, but that's not what the Boulets focus on. Starting out, the cold intro was really cool. This time they're really leaning into that storyline that they started in season 2, where they did the Faye Dunaway style mommy dearest, don't fuck with me fellas. And they were trying to get their show produced, and now they actually have their show, and anyone that gets in the way is going to get mowed down, and I love that energy and attitude. They both looked really good in the cold open as well as in their video messages. They're giving a old 80s Hollywood glamour, and I like that that is what the first episode focused on with Jesus Christ. Setting it up like they were watching the movie and then following through with that television storyline of them having to do horror movie icons in their own drag lens. Really quick segue before we talk about that. Neohudu looks so good. It was great to see her again. Let's talk about some of the early storylines that are happening before we talk about the challenge itself. We have the storyline that's set up between Aurora and Scylla, and they both don't think that they are ready to compete, that they are not ready to be a part of this experience. And both of them keep cutting looks at each other, keep making snide comments, and anytime they have a chance to talk about the other, they take that opportunity. I was really excited for Aurora going into this season, and I don't know, I'm still excited, but I'm just not really loving this drama that they're being caught up in. Out of drag, they give me like a John McClane of YouTube, that kind of opulent, I'm a 7,000-year-old ethereal being that has been there, done that, and I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm talking about type energy, and I really fuck with that energy, where Scylla is definitely giving me that person at the nightclub that sort of just likes to make drama just to see what's gonna happen, but isn't necessarily ready for any of the follow-through. That's an interesting storyline that we've got, and I'm curious how long the Boulets will entertain it. Unless both of these monsters really are giving, I have a feeling that this is gonna be a short-lived storyline. I feel like Scylla is definitely going to be out early. They're definitely getting that edit of this is someone who is a little bit out of their element. Other interesting storyline that is going on in this season is that the Boulets mentioned specifically that this was their wild card group of monsters. And Big Boulet said that in previous seasons, they've given passes to people because they just wanted to know what they were going to do. They believed in them, they believed in their success and talents, and they wanted to know what was going to happen next. Something that I thought about the last season in particular was there were a lot of moments where I thought someone should have been in the bottom. Maybe they were safe, and something always felt a little bit hands-on overproduced about last season, and to some extent season 4 as well, where I could sense that someone was getting a pass, but I didn't understand why. So now hearing this, it sort of confirms those suspicions that maybe in the last 2 seasons they were getting a little bit too close to the ghouls and wanting to foster their success rather than teach them a lesson that if they do poorly in the competition, they don't get to slide through. I think the Boulets are really fair and judicial with how they look at the entire course of the season, but sometimes in the last 2 seasons, it felt like people were not getting the same amount of space to make a mistake. I think specifically about Onyx on Dix last season, who made a mistake in the beginning and was immediately harshly punished. But then you had other performers in that season that would make mistakes and they would just sort of get a blind eye. So I appreciated that acknowledgement that going forward for this season in particular, the Boulets are not going to be giving passes to people. If you slip up, then you're in the bottom, and I like that. That's what I've always liked about Dragula, is that it is a much more fair judicial competition, unlike other reality TV shows where Rue's favorite goes all the way to the very end. So our very first floor show ever is the Horror Icons Challenge, and this is a really great way to see what these monsters are going to do going forward. It's a nice way to set up their characters and what inspires their horror drag, what inspires them as a monster, because your favorite horror film in this situation is really going to dictate what you do with everything. If your favorite horror icon that you are inspired by in drag is the xenomorph from Alien, you are probably going to be delivering some more futuristic or retro future concepts as you explore your drag. If you are more of a classic Ghostface, Michael Myers, you might be more of the masked type drag, what have you. So this is a really nice way to stamp out your brand of who you are as a monster and also what you love and what you gravitate towards in horror. What is that thing that gets you scared? What's that thing that gets you excited at the same time? The Fright Beat was really fun. I liked that they actually did a full entire scare maze. The production value is really high this season, and I love seeing how much money and effort clearly went in to constructing this season. So I'm excited to see what everything is going to look like going forward. Energy wise so far, I'm really loving Pie's sort of forward thinking, worldly type of viewpoints where everybody is included in this conversation of drag. Nobody's gate kept out of it. I'm really loving Asia. I fuck with their energy. I think they're so cool. They remind me of a Twitch mutual of mine that I am obsessed with, and I'm enjoying a lot of elements of this cast. I think I'm excited to see what happens next. The one that blew me away most was Anti-Heroine. I am obsessed with their mug in drag. And I liked it in the promo, but the look itself was not quite what I was expecting for the promo. And that very first look, which we'll get into in a second, blew me out of the water. So let's talk about that floor show. Everything panned out the way I was expecting it to with tops and bottoms. I really enjoyed that the Boulets let all of the ghouls stay on stage to hear all the critiques because they all got to vote for who they thought should be up for extermination. And in Drag Race, when they've made a top 2 situation of queens vote for who should go home, they keep everybody on the stage, but when it was group vote time, they dismissed them all back to Untucked, which was infuriating. So I'm glad that the Boulets kept the ghouls on stage to hear the critiques so that they have a full picture of what they're voting for, and if they choose to vote fairly, they have all the resources and tools to do so, not just basing it off of vague ideas of what might have been the criticism. So starting out with Asia Consent doing Art the Clown, I was really obsessed with this look. I liked that they incorporated literally every tenet of Dragula, glamour, horror, and filth, all in the exact same category. Very rarely do we see someone come in and stamp their drag right away with all of the Boulet tenants. Typically we'll see someone sort of focus on one thing or another, and we don't see all of them in one package. The one thing I do want to say about Asia is that it bugged me a lot, and it really rubbed me the wrong way that the scare actor took their wig at the beginning. And I'm sure that the scare actors were messing with everyone and maybe pulling on their props, and maybe some of them held on to those props better than others, and Asia just lost that wig, and the good vibes only type character that they seemed to be was like, yeah, whatever, I'm chilling. I would have been leaving that set in handcuffs because I would have tackled that scare actor to the ground. I would have fully been escorted off that property. I cannot believe that they took that wig and never gave it back to them. And for someone whose name has consent in their name, they did not consent to taking their wig away. They did not consent to someone putting their hands on them to remove an article of their drag and run off with it and not return it. And I'm positive that the Boulets had nothing to do with this and they weren't involved in saying, hey, take somebody's wig and just see what happens. I'm sure that they didn't do that. If this was RuPaul, that certainly would have been in conversation, but I think that was wildly inappropriate that they got their wig taken away during the introductions. And more than anything, I wish that someone had intervened there. Someone from the camera crew had been like, yo, you were not hired to do that. Give that nice lady her wig back and you go and sit in the green room until you resolve whatever trauma made you decide that you needed to remove someone's drag. And also, your pay is being docked. Get the hell off set. Asia was perfect. I loved them. Very much my winner. Glad that they won. Anti-heroine's drag was so cool doing Audrey too. I liked that the wig was a little more artichoke-y. I really loved that they had all of this info on their pot of what they are, who they are, their pronouns, info about them as a drag artist that was compacted really well and branded well. And then on top of it, this really sleek, dancerly, feminine silhouette where it billows out at the hips, really tight little waist, and then busty, bringing in that hyper femininity in the body. And then you get to the face and it's hyper masculine with the facial hair and the drag king cut creases where it's really sharp angled lines that all go on the cheekbones specifically and aren't really trying to highlight the apples of your cheeks. It was more masculine type makeup. And so blending both hyper masculine and hyper feminine concepts together to create this really incredible non-binary out of gender illusion was brilliant stamping. I thought it was camp. I thought it was glamour down. And so they were very much in a high spot for me. Aurora did the Mummy, and I wasn't sure if they were doing the bisexual classic The Mummy. I don't know if they were trying to go for an Imhotep look, but it did not translate as that. As a matter of fact, nothing even looked synergistic with the Mummy. This character's been done before, but I would have preferred Aurora to do someone like Elvira, Lily Munster, someone who is more of a glamour womana type character. Maybe Aurora was really afraid to do something that was more hyper femme for the first runway, considering that she came in glamour, but that is their drag, so why not lean into that? Sigourney Beaver had no problems leaning into glamour, and it did quite well for her. So I don't understand why Aurora went for something that seemed very out of her element. And why was there a cone bra? Is this Madonna? I'm very confused. Is this the classic Universal Mummy? I don't know. It didn't give that either. The makeup kind of resembled the poster if you Google classic Universal Mummy, but is that enough? I don't think so. Desiree did a FNAF look, which I thought was interesting, and I didn't really understand why people were coming for them about doing FNAF. I think that is very much an element of horror, even if it's in gaming. There is a movie that is about FNAF now. I liked the construction of it. My problem with drag and masks and big costuming is if I can't see your face, have you done enough? And because it was all one big body piece, I felt like that was a kind of safe look for me, but it was really cool construction-wise and looked expensive. Gray did TCM, and I think we've seen Leatherface a couple times on Dragula. It was a solid look. Jaharia did Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I appreciated the interpretation on it. I liked the bodysuit, and I liked what it looked like. It was stoned well, and it was kind of giving me a drag of all traits type of vibe. It wasn't anything that stood out as really exciting, but also wasn't bad, which I think is what a lot of these looks were for me. And the Boulets kind of implied that that was what it was for them as well. I was quite surprised with Majesty's look, and I thought it was hella shady that they put Majesty as the second Dracula, knowing that it was the stronger one so that it didn't have to end on a bad Dracula. I really enjoyed the coming out in the wheelchair and then having this orgasmic blood that was just everywhere and filthy and scary. And my God, does Majesty know how to perform. Majesty has a huge storyline right now because they're coming back into the competition. and they're getting a second chance. And they really didn't think the Boulets were even going to take it seriously, but here they are. And I'm honestly not mad at Majesty being here anymore. I was a little bit confused at first, but now I'm just here for it. I'm excited to see what they do and how their drag is going to be different from the first time. Already I'm seeing a very different style of energy from them, and it seems that they figured out who they are. They just want to figure out who they are on Dragula now and where they fit into this universe and where they are in the Dragula cinematic universe. Next up was Pie. And is it mean to say that I thought Pie looked like if Jovska slayed? The tail was a little floppy, but I liked the look conceptually, and I liked what it was and what it could have been, but it was definitely on the lower safe for me. Scylla doing the human centipede, I initially thought was really cool the way that it moved. Presentationally, I thought it was fun, but then they showed some of the other scene work that was happening, and Scylla sort of just flopping around on the stage and cumbersomely carrying the rest of those bodies. And then it became less impressive the more that I saw of it. And so I think it was very smart that they used the scroll on themselves because they needed it. Sometimes things look really cool on Dragula in that initial 30-second shot that we get. And then the Boulets talk about it and we see them lumbering about the stage, not performing at all. And then I think, damn, they really got a nice edit, because I thought this was fierce at first, and now I don't think that. Severity Stone was doing Candyman, and I felt bad because Severity was mentioning that they just did not have the time to put together what they wanted to do. This happens a lot in the drag scene where you have a prompt, you need to do something, and so you just go to the thrift store and get what you can, try to put it together really fast. It was giving, I have a Halloween party next week I was just invited to, but I don't have a costume. What do I have in my closet? What can I go and get for $12.99? I felt bad for them in that aspect because they seemed like a nice human being and just really got in their own way. There have been times when I was still doing drag that I was wearing the most low budget, garbage piece of ass that I could have ever found for $15 on Amazon or at the Goodwill, and I would go out on that stage and I would pretend that I was wearing $1 million. It's all about having the attitude and the presentation. If you go out, Eeyore, I didn't do it right, y'all probably won't like it, y'all probably won't enjoy it, bam, bam, here I am. The audience is going to sense your sadness and they won't connect with it. If you go out and you're like, yes, fierce, work, I am that bitch, and you're in a t-shirt, they're gonna be like, I don't know who this delusional queen is, but you better work. And I wish that they had just pushed themselves a little bit out of their brain a little bit. This is someone who seems really good at drag and is just not good at bringing that drag to TV, because your personality has to be so much bigger that it extends outside of the camera. And I felt bad that Severity did so poorly in this first episode and managed to go out, because even in the challenge, they seemed checked out. They seemed ready to get out of there. Proud of them for going shark diving. Next up is Vivi the Force doing Pinhead, and initially I was really excited for Vivi. This look, they mentioned how they wanted to incorporate kink culture and they wanted to bring that to Dragula, and I think that's a really great message. Kink culture and BDSM culture is a really huge segment of the LGBTQ community, and I wish that that had been spotlighted just a bit more. Doing Pinhead, I don't know, is enough to express that. And I think there's ways that you could do your own Cenobite and create that character for yourself and incorporate the message you want to do, and I just didn't see enough of that. I'm still excited to see what Vivi does because these seem to be high production numbers, but I'm gonna want a little more presentation and not expect the costume to do the work, because that's kind of what it seemed like, is that the costume will do the work for me and I don't really have to do anything more. And the judges kind of commented on that. And then we have Yuri, who has been on Drag Race Down Under, I believe season 2 or 3. I haven't gotten there yet, but I will eventually. So it's interesting in my personal timeline that I'm seeing Yuri in their more realized version, and then eventually when I watch their Drag Race Down Under season, it will have been several years before they're at now. So it's interesting timeline-wise. They did a Dracula look as well. They were presented as the worst Dracula. It was so shady to put them in front of Majesty, but I understand why it happened. When you have two looks that are exactly the same, it's better to put them next to each other television-wise so that we as the audience have proper before and after comparison, and they're not split up like one of them is the first to come out and then one of them is number 8, because then by the time we get to number 8, we might not realize that one or the other did something more spectacular or more of a flub than the other. So it's just good for television comparison for us that we don't get too much dissonance as an audience member. That being said, their look was definitely a lot more low-key. I appreciated the idea of transforming into a bat, and I wonder if that is some of their Drag Race. Gotta have a surprise, gotta have a reveal, gotta have something that is more than just what you see initially coming through. Because that is very much in the Drag Race spectrum of drag, is that you don't just do one thing, you tear it off and it reveals to something else. I don't know if the Boulets need that. I don't think they gravitate towards that as the thing that goes yes for them. So I hope that Yuri can sort of shed some of that Drag Race mentality for Dragula. I think we even see that in the Traitors and the way that some of the drag queens from Drag Race present themselves there, or in Big Brother. You know what I mean? They take certain elements of that television knowledge and they translate that to something that is not what they did before. Severity and Aurora have to go shark diving, which was an insane first challenge. I could not believe that they made them do that, but also on a production standpoint, it did seem like it was maybe the following day because it was bright as hell outside, where they get on the boat, they go out and do the shark diving, but they probably have an instructor there to help them understand how to not panic. So that's gonna be about half an hour of water prep and just getting used to it. And then they've got to do all the filming and the different various shots, come out and get them both talking and do their confessionals, then get them back on a plane and send them somewhere else. And if you think about the previous production day probably being somewhere to 8 to 12 hours, very likely what happened is they left the floor show, did all their confessionals, everything they needed to do, woke up the next day, got on a plane to wherever they went shark diving at, did their instruction things, and went out to the water, did all that, but probably did makeup in the style they did the day before. So I imagine production-wise, the Boulets were not there. And they normally are present for Fright Feats. But if this happened in conjunction with normal filming, the Boulets would have been at the studio with the other 10 monsters. But then that also doesn't make sense because whoever was going to survive the Fright Feat would not have been able to be present for that filming day. So I'm wondering if this happened over a weekend. I love production stuff. It's my favorite thing to ponder about when it comes to reality TV. But this event had to have been a separate day. Unless this was a very short producer day and maybe they only did 6-7 hours of critiques and floor show and judging and voting and confessionals, but that seems highly unlikely. So maybe this happened over a weekend. I'm very fascinated by that. I'm excited for the Boulets podcast and I hope they talk a little more about this. To me, sometimes I feel like Dragula actually takes a week or multiple days of filming. It doesn't seem like Drag Race where they've got 2 days to do one episode and they film it as a week. Sometimes it feels like they have like 3 or 4 days to conceptualize their look and put it together. But I don't know. That is the end for episode 1. What did y'all think? I will be reviewing every episode going forward and I'm so excited. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and I will see y'all on the flip and next week for another Dragula review. And goodbye.